On a slab like this, you can actually leave the bark on or you can take it off. I prefer to take it off because I don't want pieces to be flaking off, inside my house like this. But if you want to keep the bark, you can seal it in with like a polyurethane or an epoxy. Just make sure it's fully sealed so that little pieces don't break off later. So the first thing I'm going to do here is remove this bark. The bulk of the bark came off pretty easily with just a sharp chisel. Now I'm going to take the rest of it off and just sort of clean it up real nice with an orbital sander. If you look real closely right here, you'll see all these little marks. These are from bugs kind of burrowing between the sapwood and the bark. You could leave those if you wanted. That can be kind of a cool look. I decided for this console table, I want them mostly gone. So I'm going to go ahead and take the belt sander and get a little bit more aggressive with my sanding. Just finished cleaning up this live edge and it turned out great. I love the look that I have here. There's a lot of little worm or bug holes or wherever the heck these are left. It kind of adds a little bit of character and I love it. So the next thing we need to do now is check it for flatness and then cut it to its final width. Before I go any further, I want to make sure I stabilize this large knot and fill this smaller knot. And I'm going to do that with CA glue. All right, so the next thing I want to do is cut this thing down to the right size. The customer said that they want this thing to be about 6 to 7 inches wide. So because this thing is a live edge, it's not really consistent throughout the whole thing. So what I think I'm going to do is make this part, this flat, if you will, 6 inches, and then the live edge will be the kind of that additional inch that will kind of float here and there. But I still need this to be a straight edge. So I'm going to have to kind of take an average, if you will, and kind of just take a bunch of marks and then cut a straight section off that goes through those marks. Ultimately, I decided I want to keep all of this knot that's right here that I filled in on the previous step. So what I'm going to do is cut the board right about here, just beyond that knot, which ends up being about 2 inches. So I'm going to take about 2 inches off this board. If you have a keen eye, you might have noticed, even with my awesome editing skills, that I actually lost power in the middle of that cut, which was freaking terrible. I don't usually make a cut through a piece of wood that thick, that long, and I don't usually have that problem with my 15 amp circuit, But luckily I do have a 20 amp circuit that I added to my garage a couple months back, and here's the video right here if you want to see that. And I hooked it up to that, and then I had no problems. So let's move on to the next step. One thing I want to point out, apparently walnut sawdust is actually really bad for you. And after learning that when I did my desk build, I made sure that from that point on, every time I cut it, I make sure I wear my respirator. So you should do the same thing. I got this board from Kettle Moraine Hardwood, and they did a fantastic job milling this slab flat. It has almost no wiggle, so it's pretty much good to go. But just to clean it up a little bit, I'm gonna run it through the planer on the top and bottom. And now we get to sand, and sand, and sand some more, until we eventually end up at 400 grit. But the good news is, sawdust is man glitter. Okay, I've worked my way through all of these grits. Let's see, 60, 80, 120, and 180, which is on the sander now. So what I like to do at this point is water pop the workpiece. What that means is to literally spray the workpiece with water so that the grain will actually stand up. And then you can come through with 240 and 400 and actually sand that smooth. And then what'll happen is your workpiece will actually be smoother, and it'll stay smoother longer, and it'll stay smoother when it might get a little bit of water or something on it if it's not fully protected. So let's go ahead and water pop this part, and then we can move on with sanding. So after water popping, as expected, the finish is quite rough. So now it's time to finish our sanding with that 240 grit and 400 grit sandpaper. All right, so now I have 2 of 3 coats of my Odie's oil applied to our console table. To apply the Odie's oil, I use one of these little scrubby pads, and I just work the oil in. And then after that, I let the oil sit on the surface for about 20 minutes, and then I wipe the excess off, and then I wait 24 hours before applying the next coat. And like I said, this is coat 2 of 3. So what I'm going to do next is install the legs and then put the final coat on. For the legs, I opted to go with these hairpin legs that I got off of Amazon. I'll put a link to these in my description. I'm going to use these threaded wood inserts with some of these panhead screws. Something to note, this is a very narrow console table. So what I'm going to do is actually just use 2 of these legs. Then I'm going to use some L brackets to attach the middle of the table to the studs in the wall. So it should be plenty strong. Well, that is it. I hope you guys liked this build. If you did, please hit like and subscribe and drop me a comment. And while you're at it, go ahead and check out one of these other videos I got for you too. See you guys.